The ground beneath Malta is not ground, it is memory, compressed, sealed, and silent for thousands of years before anyone thought to look. When workers in the town of Paola began cutting through limestone in 1902, they were not expecting anything. They were digging a well. Simple, practical, ordinary. But the drill broke through the surface rock and kept going, and somewhere below the crust of that small island, it opened into a space that should not have existed. A vast underground chamber carved by human hands, stretching downward in ways that did not make sense for a civilization that was supposed to have been primitive. The men stopped working. Some of them refused to go back down. What they had found would take decades to begin understanding, and in many ways, it has never been fully understood. Malta is a small island in the Mediterranean, roughly 316 square kilometers. Most people who know it think of it as a place of sun, sea, and Baroque churches. Some know it for its medieval fortifications, its long history of foreign rulers, the Knights of St. John who left their mark across the capital Valletta. But beneath all of that history, beneath the Knights, beneath the Romans, beneath the Phoenicians, beneath even the Bronze Age peoples who came before them, there is something older, something that existed on this island before writing, before wheels, before almost everything we tend to think of as civilization. Archaeologists call them the Maltese temple builders. They do not have a proper name because they left no writing behind. They arrived on Malta around 5900 BCE, possibly from Sicily, and for roughly 4,000 years they built things on this island, enormous things. Stone temples of extraordinary complexity and scale, arranged in ways that suggest a deep knowledge of the sky, of geometry, of how stone behaves under weight. And then somewhere around 2500 BCE, they vanished. The temples fell silent. The population either collapsed or scattered, and no one is certain why. Most of what these people built is now underground. The temples visible at Hagar Kim, at Menidra, at Tarsian. They are impressive. They are old enough to be humbling, but the place that truly captures how strange and how deep this civilization went is not visible from the road. You do not pass it on the way to the beach. To reach it, you descend a spiral staircase carved into the living rock, and you go down, and the air changes and the light disappears, and you arrive somewhere that feels less like an archaeological site and more like the interior of a dream. The Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum, underground, cut by hand into the limestone of a Maltese hillside, layer by layer, chamber by chamber, over a period that researchers estimate may span 1,000 years or more. Some sections of it date to around 3600 BCE. That makes the Hypogeum, at minimum, older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramid at Giza by over 1,000 years, older than almost anything else built by human hands that has survived intact into the modern world. And it survived because it was underground, because the limestone sealed it, because no one knew it was there. The workers who broke through in 1902 were not archaeologists. For several years after the discovery, the construction continued around it. Some scholars believe a significant portion of the site was disturbed or destroyed before formal excavation began. The full scope of what was lost in those early years is impossible to measure. What remained, however, was remarkable enough to change what researchers thought they knew about prehistoric Malta and about the humans who lived there. The Hypogeum is not a cave. That is the first and most important thing to understand about it. A cave is a natural formation. This is not natural. Every corridor, every chamber, every carved niche and decorated ceiling was made deliberately, with tools made of stone and bone and antler, by people working in the dark, removing rock one piece at a time, shaping a space below the earth according to a plan that existed only in their minds. It descends through 3 levels. The uppermost level was carved earliest and shows the roughest workmanship, though even here the effort required is staggering. The middle level is where the architecture becomes something else entirely. The chambers here are not storage rooms or simple burial spaces. They are elaborately finished. Ceilings are carved to mimic the corbelled stone roofs of the surface temples. Red ochre pigment covers the walls in spirals, dots, and geometric patterns that have never been fully decoded. Archways are shaped with a precision that feels almost impossible given the tools available. There is a chamber called the Oracle Room, a narrow oval space whose acoustic properties are so specific and so strange that a low male voice speaking or humming within it sends vibrations resonating through the entire complex in ways that researchers have measured but not fully explained. Whether this was accidental or intentional is a question that sits at the center of everything we do not understand about these people. The deeper you go, the more the questions multiply. The lowest level of the hypogeum is partially submerged in water during periods of heavy rain. It is less accessible and less studied. Some sections have never been fully excavated. Researchers have mapped what they can reach, but the limits of exploration are real, and not everything below Malta's surface has been opened or examined. There are corridors that end in collapsed stone, passages that lead to sealed areas, suggestions in the rock of spaces that may still be waiting. What was the hypogeum used for? The official answer, and the most supported one, is that it functioned as a burial site. The remains of thousands of individuals were found within its chambers. Estimates range from around 7,000 people to over 30,000, depending on the source and the methodology used. Bones were found arranged in ways that suggest deliberate placement rather than simple disposal. Grave goods were present, small clay figurines, stone objects, remnants of food or offerings. The dead were clearly brought here with intention and with care, but burial does not explain the Oracle Room. It does not explain the acoustic engineering, which seems far too specific to have been accidental. It does not explain certain features of the architecture that suggest the space was designed to be used by the living as much as the dead. Chambers wide enough for gatherings, areas that may have functioned as sleeping spaces, evidence in some interpretations of ritual activity carried out underground over long periods of time. Some researchers have proposed that the hypogeum served simultaneously as a necropolis, a ceremonial center, and possibly a place of oracular ritual, where sound was used deliberately to induce altered states of consciousness. This is not a fringe theory. There is measurable acoustic evidence, physical architectural evidence, and comparable examples in other ancient cultures of underground spaces used for ritual sound. But it remains unproven, and the temple builders left nothing written that could confirm it. This is the particular frustration of Malta's prehistoric period. The evidence is physically present. You can stand inside it. You can touch the walls. You can hear the resonance in the Oracle Room for yourself if the visit permits it. But the people who built this place are absent from the record in almost every other way. No texts, no images of their faces, no names for their gods or their dead. Just the stone they moved, the chambers they cut, and the bones they placed inside. What is known is that this civilization existed on Malta for an extraordinarily long time in relative isolation. The island's position in the central Mediterranean meant it was reachable but not easily accessible. The temple builders developed their own architectural language, their own burial practices, their own artistic traditions, and their own methods of celestial alignment. Several of the surface temples are oriented toward the winter solstice sunrise, the equinoxes, or specific stellar positions with an accuracy that requires sustained astronomical observation over generations. They were not primitive. That word, applied to cultures without writing, tends to collapse too much nuance. The people who built the hypogeum were working within a different set of constraints and with a different set of priorities, but the evidence of what they produced demands a more careful accounting. The corbelled ceilings, the red ochre decorations, the acoustic engineering, the organization of thousands of burials across multiple levels. These things require planning, coordination, specialized knowledge, and labor sustained across long periods. Communities do not build like this accidentally. The small statue found in the Hypogeum during the early excavations, a reclining figure in terracotta, smooth, heavy-limbed, lying on its side, is one of the most reproduced images of Maltese prehistory. Known as the Sleeping Lady, it suggests something about how these people understood the boundary between sleeping and waking, between the living and the dead, between the world above ground and whatever they believed existed below it. The figure is not sleeping peacefully. It is too still, too deliberate. Whether it represents a devotee, a priestess, a deity, or something that has no modern equivalent is genuinely unknown. Above the Hypogeum in the town of Paula, life continues in the way it always has. Streets, houses, cars, the noise of an ordinary Maltese neighborhood. The limestone beneath those streets contains chambers that were sealed for over 4,000 years. The people who lived above them for centuries had no idea they were there. Roads were built over them. Houses settled above them. Children played on ground that was hollow beneath their feet, filled with the carved work and the bones of a civilization that had come and gone before recorded history began on the island. That kind of silence is its own kind of mystery. The Hypogeum is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and visits are strictly controlled, limited to a small number of people per day to preserve the fragile environment inside. The humidity, the carbon dioxide from human breath, the subtle vibrations of footsteps, all of it affects the pigment, the stone, the structural integrity of chambers that have survived longer than most things built on this planet. Getting a ticket often requires booking weeks or months in advance. Many people who visit Malta never get inside, which means that most of the people walking above it, taking photographs of the Baroque churches and the harbor views, have no real sense of what is beneath them. Beyond the Hypogeum, the Maltese islands contain other reminders that the ground is not neutral. The Tarxian temples, discovered in 1913 when a farmer noticed unusual stones interfering with his plowing, revealed a complex of interconnected structures with carved spirals, animal friezes, and the remains of a colossal statue. Only the lower section survived, but the scale suggested a figure several meters tall. The temples at Hagar Kim and Menajdra sit on a coastal ridge in the south of Malta, exposed to the Mediterranean wind, aligned with such precision to the solstice and the equinox positions of the sun that they function, even today, as accurate astronomical markers. On the morning of the summer solstice, sunlight enters a specific hole in the stone of Hagar Kim and projects a perfect ellipse onto a stone slab inside. The alignment has held for 5,500 years. No one told these people how to do that. They figured it out. The Gantija temples on the nearby island of Gozo are older still, among the oldest freestanding stone structures on Earth, predating both the Hypogeum and most of the Maltese surface temples. The name itself comes from the Maltese word for giant. Local tradition for centuries held that the temples were built by a race of giants because the stones used in their construction were simply too large in the minds of later inhabitants to have been moved by ordinary people. Some of the stones weigh over 50 tons. They were moved by ordinary people. That is somehow the stranger fact. And then the builders stopped. Around 2500 BCE, or possibly earlier, the Maltese temple-building civilization came to an end. The surface temples were abandoned. The Hypogeum fell out of use. New people arrived on the islands. Bronze Age settlers with different tools, different burial practices, different ways of understanding the world. Whether the temple builders were absorbed by these newcomers, died from famine or disease, were displaced by violence or simply declined gradually over generations is not known. There is some evidence of population stress in the final period. Changes in diet, possible resource depletion, but the record is thin and the conclusions uncertain. What is certain is that they left or ended, and the things they built remained, sealed under the ground, covered by time, discovered only by accident when someone was trying to dig a well. There is a particular quality to the light inside the hypogeum on the rare occasions when visitors are allowed to see it at its quietest. The modern lighting installed to allow viewing is low and carefully positioned to preserve the pigment on the walls. The red ochre spirals glow faintly. The carved ceilings press close. The temperature is constant, cool, indifferent to the season above. Sound behaves differently here. Voices carry in directions they should not. The echoes arrive slightly late. Standing in the oracle room, you can understand, without agreeing with any particular interpretation, why the people who built this space returned to it for ritual. There is something in the acoustics, in the darkness, in the pressure of all that stone above you that insists on seriousness. It does not feel like a basement. It does not feel like a tomb exactly. It feels like a threshold. The bones found inside belong to people who lived between roughly 3600 and 2500 BCE. They were placed here by their community with objects that mattered in a space that required extraordinary effort to create. The people who carried them down the carved stairs and arranged them in the painted chambers believed something about what happened after death, believed it strongly enough to spend generations cutting this space from the rock to honor it. Whatever they believed, it shaped one of the most remarkable underground structures ever built. We will probably never know what it was. What remains is the stone, the chambers, the pigment that has lasted 5,000 years because the air down there does not move, the acoustic anomalies that still function exactly as they did when the last ceremony was held in this place, in a time before any written record exists to describe it. The bones of thousands of people who lived on a small Mediterranean island and understood something about stone, about sky, about sound, and about death that has not been fully recovered. Above the hypogeum, the town of Paola goes about its business. The roads are warm, the light is sharp. The noise of everyday life carries in the way it always does. And below the road, below the foundations of the houses, below the ordinary ground of an ordinary neighborhood, the chambers are dark and cool and absolutely still. The spirals on the walls have not faded. The acoustics in the oracle room are undisturbed. The stones that were moved by human hands 5,500 years ago have not shifted. Whatever the people who built this place were trying to say, to their gods, to their dead, to whoever came after them, the message is still there, waiting in the dark, in the carved limestone, in the particular silence that exists only underground. No one has fully read it yet.